The snow fell steadily on the deserted train platform as Sarah Chen sat on the cold bench, her thin blue uniform offering little protection against the December wind. At 29, she had dedicated 6 years of her life to pediatric nursing, but tonight she faced the harsh reality that compassion did not pay rent. The hospital had laid off a third of its staff, and Sarah's modest savings had been exhausted within 2 weeks. Her breath formed small clouds in the frigid air as she checked the departure board one more time. The last train to the shelter across. Town would arrive in 30 minutes, assuming the weather did not delay it further. She pulled her thin cardigan tighter around her shoulders and tried not to think about how dramatically her life had changed in such a short time. The sound of expensive leather shoes echoing across the platform made her look up. A man in an impeccably tailored charcoal coat approached, carrying a small child bundled in a bright red winter jacket. Even in the dim station lighting, Sarah could see the exhaustion etched in his features, the way he held himself with the careful control of someone barely keeping everything together. Behind him followed a woman in a crisp business suit, speaking rapidly into her phone about missed flights and rescheduled meetings. When she finished her call, she approached the man with obvious frustration. "Mr. Whitmore, I have managed to book you on the first flight out tomorrow morning, but there is simply no childcare available on such short notice. Perhaps we should postpone the Singapore deal until after the holidays." The man, who Sarah now understood to be some sort of businessman, shook his head firmly. "That deal represents 18 months of negotiations, Margaret. I cannot postpone it." He looked down at the little girl in his arms, who appeared to be around 4 years old, with dark hair peeking out from beneath her knitted hat. There has to be another solution. Sarah watched this exchange with growing understanding. Here was a man caught between professional obligations and parental responsibility, a situation she had witnessed countless times in the hospital when single parents struggled to balance work demands with their children's needs. The little girl stirred in his arms and whispered something that made him close his eyes in apparent pain. "I know, sweetheart, Daddy has to go away for work, but I will find someone nice to stay with you." "Like Mommy used to?" the child asked in a small voice that carried across the quiet platform. "Yes," he said softly. "Like Mommy used to." Sarah found herself standing before she had consciously decided to move. The nurse in her could not ignore a child in need, regardless of her own circumstances. "Excuse me?" she said, approaching the small group. "I could not help but overhear. I am a pediatric nurse, and if you need someone to care for your daughter, I might be able to help." The businessman turned to study her with sharp, intelligent eyes. She was suddenly aware of how she must look, tired, underdressed for the weather, sitting alone on a train platform late at night. Not exactly the image of a reliable caregiver. "You are a nurse?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. "For 6 years. I specialize in children's care. I was just laid off from Metropolitan Children's Hospital due to budget cuts." Sarah's honesty surprised her, but something about this situation demanded complete truthfulness. Margaret stepped forward protectively. "Mr. Whitmore, you cannot seriously be considering hiring a stranger you met on a train platform." But the man continued to study Sarah's face, seeing something there that his assistant had missed. "What is your name?" "Sarah Chen." "I have references, background checks, medical certifications." She reached into her small purse and pulled out her nursing credentials, the official documents that represented years of education and dedication. The little girl had been watching this exchange with the serious attention that children give to conversations that might affect their lives. Suddenly, she reached out toward Sarah with one mittened hand. "You smell like the nice nurses at the hospital," she said simply. "Daddy, she smells safe." The businessman looked at his daughter, then back at Sarah, and she saw the moment when desperation overrode caution. "Miss Chen, I find myself in an unusual position. I have a business trip that cannot be postponed, and my daughter Emma needs someone to care for her for the next 5 days." He paused, studying Sarah's worn clothes, and the fact that she was sitting alone on a train platform in a snowstorm. I suspect you need employment as much as I need reliable childcare. What I am about to propose may sound unconventional, but I believe it could benefit us both. Sarah waited, sensing that this moment might change the trajectory of her life. You need a home and I need a mother figure for my daughter, he continued, his voice steady despite the weight of what he was suggesting. Not permanently, not romantically, but practically. I have a large house with a guest suite. Emma needs someone who understands children. You need a place to stay and compensation for your time. The platform fell silent except for the wind and the distant sound of an approaching train. Sarah looked at the little girl who was watching her with hopeful eyes, then at the man who was offering her salvation wrapped in the form of temporary employment. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Whitmore?" she asked carefully. "Live in my house for the week while I am away. Care for Emma as you would any patient. In return, I will pay you what amounts to 6 months' salary, and you will have a warm place to stay during one of the coldest weeks of the year." Margaret looked scandalized. "David, this is highly irregular. You know nothing about this woman." But David Whitmore was looking at Sarah with the desperation of a single father who had run out of conventional options. "Emma lost her mother 8 months ago. Since then, she has been through 4 nannies, none of whom lasted more than a few weeks. She either frightens them away, or they find the job too demanding." He shifted his daughter to his other arm, and Sarah noticed how naturally the child settled against him, completely trusting in his care. "But she responded to you immediately," he continued. "In my experience, children are excellent judges of character. If Emma feels safe with you, that tells me everything I need to know." Sarah looked at this unlikely opportunity that had presented itself in the form of a stranded businessman and his motherless child. A week ago, she had been a respected pediatric nurse with a steady job and a small but comfortable apartment. Tonight, she was homeless and facing an uncertain future. "Mr. Whitmore," she said slowly, "I accept your proposal, but I want you to understand that I will care for Emma as if she were my own child. Her emotional well-being is not negotiable, regardless of whatever business emergency you are facing." For the first time since their conversation began, David smiled. "Miss Chen, I would not expect anything less. Emma, what do you think? Would you like Miss Sarah to stay with you while Daddy is away?" The little girl nodded solemnly. "Will you read me stories and make sure the monsters stay away?" "I will read you all the stories you want," Sarah promised. "And I am very good at keeping monsters away. That is part of what nurses do." As David's car pulled up to the platform, Sarah realized that this arrangement, born of mutual desperation, might just be the answer both of them had been praying for. Sometimes the most unlikely partnerships are formed not in boardrooms or at social events, but on cold train platforms where two people discover that what they need most is exactly what the other has to offer. The snow continued to fall as they drove toward David's house, but for the first time in weeks, Sarah felt warm.